During the Middle Ages, medieval Europe was engaged in almost constant warfare and conflict. European warfare during the Middle Ages was marked by a transformation in the character of warfare from antiquity, changing military tactics and the role of cavalry and artillery. In addition to military tactical and technological innovations during this period, chivalric military and religious ideals arose, giving motivation for engagement in the ceaseless warfare. In the Iberian Peninsula, chivalric ideals and institutions would be adopted and exercised with more fervor than anywhere else. Early Spanish chivalry, or chivalric codes of manners and proper military engagement, is believed to have arrived in the Iberian Peninsula during the 10th century CE, in the context of the Reconquest, when Frankish knights, who were willing to fight the Muslim invaders of Iberia prior to the Crusades, appeared to protect pilgrims flocking to the tomb of Apostle James in Galicia. Saint James himself was known and celebrated in Christianity as the slayer of the Moors, and the discovery of his body by Christians has been considered a possible igniting factor of the Reconquest. The Reconquest had begun under Alfonso II, and would last nearly 700 years as Christians attempted to suppress and push Muslims from the Iberian Peninsula. However, the instatement of chivalric knightly orders and the chivalric ideals and codes of conduct weren't present on the Iberian Peninsula until almost the 2nd century of the Reconquest. In the context of the Reconquest and the geographically close proximity of Christian and Muslim populations, the atmosphere for the development of knightly orders was ripened. In the subsequent centuries, chivalry flourished in Spain to a greater extent than it did in other Christian states. Chivalry in medieval Spain cannot be understood outside of the context of the military orders of knighthood. Historians seem to be conflicted as to whether knights in Spanish were directed more by Castilian and Catalan Aragonese royalty or by the papacy, but there seems to be a consensus that the knights had obligations to both and an overarching allegiance to the church, as both were in direct contact with knights. Some scholars have suggested that the later Spanish military orders, like that at the fortress of Calatrava, pledged their loyalty primarily to the kingdom, in this case Castile, but orders like the Templars or Hospitallers were more independent and not necessarily loyal to any kingdom consistently. The uniqueness of Spanish chivalry. The Iberian Peninsula had multiple factors contributing to the strong chivalric ethos exemplified by Spanish knights. One determinant factor to the strong adoption of chivalric orders in Spain is the Reconquest, in which Christian kingdoms attempted to expel Muslims from the peninsula. The greatest foes of the Spanish Christian knight were, above all, Muslims, who were not an imagined enemy, but one deeply entrenched in reality and not as distant as the infidel or enemy was for the knights of France or Germany. In other Christian kingdoms, the fighting was at least initially waged between Christians of different kingdoms, and as such was more debated and contested within Christian circles. However, in Spain the Christian knights and kingdoms were engaged with what was almost universally acknowledged as a foe to Christianity, and this common enemy had some role in uniting Christian kingdoms in the cause of the Crusades and Reconquest. In the 12th–13th century, most of the prominent Spanish knightly orders were formed. The early formation of the orders of the peninsula was dangerous and unstable. In Calatrava, during the middle of the 12th century, Castilian knights established a fortress, which would later be abandoned due to the threat of Muslim attack. Then again within 50 years a fort of the Order of Calatrava was then rebuilt and became a fortified monastic community. The prominence of knightly orders in the political and military realms of the Christian kingdoms of the peninsula fluctuated with the Crusader zeal of the kingdom's rulers. However, the power was not exclusively tied to the Crusader kings. For instance, Ferdinand III of Castile's reign facilitated the rise of more Spanish orders because of the desire in the kingdom led by the king to crusade against the Moors. However, the years that followed the death of Ferdinand III were relatively peaceful in Castile, and the morale of the orders was undermined. In this period of peace between the orders and the Muslims of the peninsula, mercenaries were hired to replace and assist knights in the fighting. Masters of the orders were no longer religiously appointed, and civil war was waged between Christian knights with conflicting loyalties. The decline of knightly orders in Spain is the subject of much debate. Some historians have attributed the fall of chivalry and knightly orders to Cervantes because he smiled Spain's chivalry away with his satirical Don Quixote. Others have suggested that chivalry's decline was due to the expulsion of the Muslims with the fall of Granada in 1492, or the centralization of political power under the reign of Ferdinand and Isabella. Once the mission of driving the Moors from Spain was accomplished, the four orders, like the great Crusader orders elsewhere in Europe, were perceived as overmighty subjects, and it became a priority for the crown to gain control over them, particularly as the not infrequent quarrels between the rival bodies was a source of dissension at a time when the crown was struggling to establish its central authority. If one subscribes to this latter view, then clearly Cervantes did not so much contribute to that event as to document its prior occurrence, a point that is central to Don Quixote, that this decline had already occurred at the time of Quixote's adventures. The Spanish kings had frequently obtained the election of close connections of the families as masters of the orders, and at Calatrava in 1489, Santiago in 1494 and Alcantara in 1495, the administration of the three magistracies were ultimately granted to King Ferdinand of Aragon, as sovereign of Aragon and king consort of Castile. Finally, by the bull Dum Intra of Pope Adrian VI dated 4 May 1523, the perpetual administration of the three orders was transferred to Charles I, King of Spain, and his heirs and successors. Later incarnations of Spanish chivalry. After the Reconquest and the loss of the prominence in the peninsula, Spanish orders then found a new role as an elite corps of the nobility, maintaining the castles and estates as commanderies to provide incomes for those who had distinguished themselves in the service of the monarch. The succeeding centuries, however, saw the rise of the Spanish Empire, and the chivalric ideals of the knights transcended and reappeared in the guise of the conquistadors in the New World. The rewards for the conquistador were similar to those of his medieval predecessor, the reconquistador: land to conquer, people to convert to Christianity, and glory or fame. The one major difference was that the conquistadors and reconquistadors were real people who also sought wealth, whereas the knight-errant of the romances was a fictional creature and different to material gain. Bernal Diaz de Castillo, a soldier who took part in the conquest of Mexico, put the conquistadors' objective succinctly: "We came here to serve God and the king, and also to get rich." Prominent knightly orders of Spain. Order of Calatrava was the first military order founded in Castile, but the second to receive papal approval. The papal bull confirming the Order of Calatrava as a militia was given by Pope Alexander III on September 26, 1164. Order of Santiago, or the Order of St. James of Compostela, was founded in the 12th century, and owes its name to the national national patron of Spain, Santiago, under whose banner the Christians of Galicia and Asturias began in the 9th century to combat and drive back the Muslims of the Iberian Peninsula. Order of Alcantara, also called the Knights of St Julien, was originally a military order of Leon, founded in 1166 and confirmed by Pope Alexander III in 1177. Order of Montesa was dedicated to Our Lady, and based at Montesa. Pope John XXII approved it on 10 June 1317, and gave it the Cistercian rule. Bibliography: Richard W. Barber, The Reign of Chivalry. Boydell Press. ISBN 9781843831822. Retrieved 4 June 2011. Philippe Contamin, War in the Middle Ages. Wiley Blackwell. ISBN 9780631144694. Retrieved 4 June 2011. Prestige, Edgar, Chivalry. Stephen Austin and Amp, Sons Limited.